Hey, okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about this idea of not doing things that you don't want to do, because this is really a great and simple way to overhaul your life, but it's obviously easier stated than understood. I'm not going to say it's easier said than done because once you practice it, it's a fairly simple thing to accomplish, but it is easier said than done because we are so trained throughout all of our lives to give on this promise that you can make to yourself of always doing things that you actually want to do versus things that you don't want to do. So I think, for a lot of people, you might hear the idea of don't do what I'm saying about don't do things that you don't want to do, and people just have this knee-jerk kickback reaction of, well, that's not remotely possible, because even if I were authentic, people have this sense that even if I were authentic and completely aligned, I would still have to do things that I don't want to do, such as pay bills or clean up your house or put dishes away after you're finished cooking, maybe cooking in general if you prepare your meals like that, or going to answering the phone when you don't want to answer it, things like that, or going to work. So these are all the different types of things that people might think are necessary components in your life that you would necessarily, people kind of have this idea that there are certain things that you're never going to be able to give on, that are never going to be things that you actually want to do. And so I am actually saying that that's not even true. So the idea is that you practice for a long time, and what you're doing is training your brain to react with a positive reaction about some things, and for you to then train your brain that when you have that positive reaction that you're actually going to listen to it, versus when you have a kickback negative reaction to the idea of doing something, or when you have a kickback reaction to the idea of doing something and it's a negative reaction, then we are training your brain to simply notice that you're having this negative reaction, so that you can start kind of chipping away at the parts of your life that are really not in alignment with you. So that's really what we have to do. It's basically an ongoing recultivation of how your mind actually works, and you're slowly retraining the neural pathways in your brain. So your brain is full of neurons, and there are different neural pathways, which just mean that there are different neurons in your brain that are more accustomed to talking to certain other neurons that are within their vicinity. And what we're trying to do is train the neurons to start speaking to other neurons, to send an electric pulse to a different neuron that's actually going to lead up to somewhere that's more of a productive, happy, higher state of consciousness, versus your neurons firing on these same pathways, playing the same game of telephone that'll eventually lead back to some kind of feeling of depression or a lower state of consciousness. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying we're going to retrain neural pathways. And that's what we have to do. So you can't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden be living a life where you are only doing things that you want to do versus only things that you don't want to do. But what you can do is start learning, and you're going to hone away at all of the different parts of your life at the same time. And when you do it this way, versus telling yourself, like a New Year's resolution or something, I'm going to be working out every single day after this day, you set yourself up for this failure, because you're making this drastic change in your life. And I'm showing kind of like, I'm picturing your life as this sort of ever expanding and contracting sphere of energy around you. And when you try to apply a very drastic change to your life, you fundamentally affect all of the workings of your sphere, and it really throws you off, and you're not able to actually do it. So that's really why a lot of things a lot of those like habits that you try to form, or a lot of the prescriptive ideas of how to get over depression or how to start being more spiritually awakened, those things are not, it's very difficult to actually execute doing the things that you hear other people recommend. So part of this too is that other people who have gotten into these habits, even if they've built them over time for themselves and can recognize that it is bringing them positivity, a lot of the time these people are not really conscious of what they've really been doing on the inside to retread their neural pathways. So even though they're actually maybe possibly doing something similar to what we're talking about, a similar process, they might not actually have noticed that they even did it. And so there's a good intention for telling people, oh, this really helps me. I love this type of yoga. I love this type of meditation. But it's one thing to be able to say that, and a totally different thing to actually be able to recommend something like that to somebody and have them be able to connect the dots for themselves to even actually do it the very first time, much less implement it as a habit into their life. There has to be sort of a gradual step up. So that's where we're going to try and train the brain to know and to recognize and eventually only be doing things that you really want to do. Because, okay, so one way that I like to conceptualize this is talking about one of my favorite teachers who's not a spiritual awakening type teacher, but I posit that everything that she teaches is basic Taoist philosophy about how energy and which is called qi works within the home and within your own energy sphere that I was talking about before. Your own personal energy sphere is the teacher that I'm talking about is Marie Kondo, who is an organizational coach, and she has found a way to introduce this concept of energy as sort of a normalized thing that people in the U.S. kind of standardized U.S. American WASPy society, most people or a lot of people hear people talking about energy, and if they're not talking about gasoline or some kind of free energy that has to do with something to do with climate change or something like that, people assume that it's some kind of woo-woo, which is just kind of this term for like silly and no basis, no it's not based in reality kind of thing to talk about. But Marie Kondo found a way to be able to talk about energy to a broad portion of society that wasn't previously talking about energy. And I think that's really cool. So her basic trick that she uses for helping people pare down their possessions in their house is that she teaches people and organize and bring forth the things that really make their living situation more, so they have a better quality of life and make their living situation more conducive to the type of life that they want to live, is this practice that she teaches which is about whether or not you kind of come up to a decision about, do I want to keep this or do I not? And you look and you feel inside your body. And she describes it as, do you have an initial immediate reaction of the thing sparking joy, or does it give you kind of a sinking feeling? And so this is something if you've never played around with energy and never really tuned into your body in a certain way, this is going to be very difficult it's difficult to have an entry point into how you even feel energy without some kind of simple a simple guideline like this one. So this was actually, I think, the first practice that really started showing me what energy was. I was always from like a very scientific background and never really understood, or I was always told that it was silly stuff that people were talking about when they were talking about energy. So this was something that helped me long before I even understood or acknowledged what a chakra was. I guess understood it because by the time I finally had it explained to me, I was like, oh wait, this is what all these other practices have been leading around to. And now I understand the fundamental component of what the rest of the world is talking about. And it's not silly. It's not without base. So Marie Kondo's teaches, I love the way she teaches it. So if something basically, so what we're going to do is go crazy, go mad, going through your home and your living space, looking at your individual things and doing the Marie Kondo practice. You can look up her books. Her last name is spelled Konda, and it's called the KonMari method, KonMari. And you go through your house and reorganize and minimize using this rule. But I'm not talking about organization today, am I? But that is a component in your energy sphere, is actually the physical components of your life. So what we're really going to do, what we're going to do in addition to that is that you're going to use this guideline to conceptualize and it's going to be a framework for every single decision that you make, including the most tiny, subtle decisions that you probably don't even notice are there. So what this does is that it actually helps you hone in on how many different turning points, let's say, because we want to get away from thinking of things as decisions, because a lot of people so my broader basis is helping people recover from trauma and abuse. And so I actually believe that most people are victims of, it's not funny. I'm very serious when I really believe that most people are victims of trauma and abuse. And I'm not just talking about acute instances of trauma such as car wrecks and things like that. I think our society, and broadly worldwide humanity, the way that we've been living for a long time, is actually a systemically abusive way of living. But I'll talk about that some other time. But within more of a just kind of a generalized way that we talk about, if people are victims of trauma and abuse, you really have minimized, or what's happened is that the abuse has caused trauma, and it over time minimizes your ability to even perceive of when there are these different little turning points in your day or in your time, different little moments. You tune out, you disconnect from your body, and you disconnect from your inner sense of what is really right or wrong from you, because you constantly have, this is what abuse is that you constantly have somebody coming in and telling you this is what is right for you. I have the hiccups. This is what is right for you, and this is not right for you. So you gradually learn, because of somebody delivering anger and condemnation to you, you learn a different let's see, a different metric for determining which things you're actually going to be doing, and just every single aspect of your personality and like the way that you live life. You establish a framework that's actually based on what your abuser is enforcing, or the abusive system is enforcing. So you become a person who, as a habit or as just a way of life, you're constantly doing things that you don't really want to do. Things that actually, like, if you really could hone in and tune in, that the things are not giving you that spark of joy, and they're actually giving you that kind of sinking feeling. So whether this is at work, if you have like a situation where your boss is kind of talking down to you, you might learn a certain way of talking and communicating with the people at work that is reflective of the environment that you're with, a boss that's constantly criticizing, and you might learn to speak in a different way to try and appease the boss and not piss them off or something like that. And these are little things that over time we learn to do, or we establish a different way of talking about our social life when we're in a different social environment, possibly, that isn't quite authentic to us. We might like use chit-chat questions that actually are not really in line with what we really want to talk about, even that are just kind of standardized chit-chat questions that people ask. And or we do things like even habits that we think of as being really good for us, like maybe like showering a certain number of times per week. So let's say, like, I always grew up with this sense that we are supposed to, like, I was supposed to shower or bathe every single day, and that has, in maybe even since maybe since I had a baby, even. So that would have been 2018. And certainly since COVID, I've definitely had this sense of, well, wait a minute, why am I showering every day? And it's kind of been something that was stretched out gradually without me even noticing that I was stretching it out and going more times without showering, like 3 times without showering a couple days in a row. I was doing it gradually. And so I didn't notice until I turned back around and said, okay, it's been a while since I've been only, washing my hair every, like, twice a week. And my hair is not as greasy as I thought I used to think it would get if I did this. So you're actually making gradual changes to your body in that instance. So your hair and your skin adapts. And likewise, you've also kind of slipped in this habit and been able to show yourself that maybe showering every day or washing your hair every day is something that your soul was saying, I don't really feel like I need to do this. It's a lot of time. It doesn't make me feel physically better, things like that. And I'm not saying, like, everybody stop showering every day if you like to do that, because there's a bunch of different components as to why a shower is a healing thing to do. That's way more complicated than just, like, how it feels on your body and your skin and, like, whether you're clean or not. There's a spiritual component to dousing yourself in hot water or cold water if you're a cold water shower person. I've never been able to I haven't been able to establish that as a practice. I've tried to do that, but anyway, so what you're gonna do is gradually train yourself to notice whether you have a spark of joy or not. Because every time in our lives that we do the things that we don't want to do, and we force ourselves to bust past that and go ahead and do the thing, we're training even if you come out on the other side and you say, that was a really fun thing to do, or I really enjoyed that, or I'm glad I did it, you are still training your brain. That might be true. It might be a really good activity for you. Like, maybe you really do love, like, running a 5K, and you would otherwise, like, love the sense of, like, waking up and going to go do that. But if you have this sense that you've been dreading it, and then you drag yourself to the 5K, and it's all you can do to really do it, and then close to finishing, you say, oh, I'm so glad I did this, and you tell yourself this whole story of how you've really done something really great for yourself finally. What you're really doing is training your brain that the only way that you're going to have this feeling of fulfillment, or this sense that life is satisfying, or like you're doing anything that's healthy, is if you do something that you really don't want to do, that your body is telling you, your mind and your emotional body is telling you, I don't really want to do this. It's not really for me. So we don't have to talk about something so concrete as doing a 5K, but it is like taking a shower, or maybe at certain moments you might think, okay, what I really need to do is clean up this thing, but I'm just straighten up this area of my house. And that's what I really, that's what I told myself I was going to do. But if you have this sinking feeling when you think about going to go clean up those items, then I'm saying those are actually things that we don't want to be doing. And what I'm also postulating is that once you get the hang of this practice, you will start to see yourself actually wanting to do. You're going to see some of these other things come back in, and you're going to be able to tell that you wanted to do them in the first place. So when you figure out your system and start noticing when something sparks joy. What is it that like really gives you that little spark, that oomph of expansion of your energetic body versus a contraction? When you really start noticing that, that is, I just lost my train of thought. When you really start noticing it, that is really when you can start to, when you actually see these things come back in, like maybe it's a 5K or something like that, or running in general, or the area of your house where you had told yourself that you needed to clean up. You'll see these things creep back in, and you'll maybe be having a great day and you walk into your house and think, oh, I could go clean up that thing that I've been meaning to clean up, because I would really love to have my desk free to do whatever. And in that moment, all of a sudden, the area that you wanted to straighten up, the idea of straightening up your desk, it suddenly sparks joy instead of giving you a sinking feeling. So what I'm saying is that you can actually create a life where every single thing feels like it's in that flow. So this is a Taoist perspective of how energy moves throughout your life, whether it's through energy through your household or through your very existence and your presence within your consciousness. You can stay within flow. You stay within the flow of feeling like things are sparking joy and like your life is going well, if you can find a way to reestablish your sense of what sparks joy versus what doesn't, and follow all of the things that spark joy, because everything that you actually need in your life will resurface and come back around. And that is how you discover who you are and what you want. And it's how you come around to being a person who is able to make decisions. And what's cool is that once you get into this kind of flow, you don't even actually have the sense that there's a decision that you're making at any given point. So instead of having this cut in the flow where there's a pause and you have to actually use your brain in this cognitive way and kind of grind through these options and make a decision, you're in flow and you don't have to spend energy even making decisions, and everything just comes to you naturally. So another way of thinking about sparking joy versus having kind of a diminishment of your energy or a dimming of your spirit is to think of it as a feeling of fear versus a feeling of love. You can categorize every single emotion, every single bodily sensation as being attached to the concept of fear or the concept of love. Once you can establish what is the feeling of something sparking joy, that you now know is love. I want you to, like, once you've figured out what is that feeling, something that you pick up and you just have this zing of like, oh my gosh, I love this. And it might not be something like really beautiful or really cool. It might be just like a very handy, like just the right screwdriver can be like one of the most, and it might be something that, would be worth even, who knows, like 25 cents or something. You couldn't even sell it, but I wouldn't give away this one screwdriver for anything because it's just the right, it has just the right, aging on it. And it might be, or, something, so it could be something that's just a utilitarian type thing that you just love, or that you don't even realize how much you love it until you think about, until you have this sense of like, oh, I'm just going to go get that one screwdriver that I know is going to work exactly right for this thing that I'm working on. And then in that moment, it's something that does spark. It's actually, even though it seems like it's just in the line of what you're working on, that's actually an instance of the screwdriver sparking joy for you, just out of your sense that it feels like a utilitarian thing. So that's also another, it's kind of a smaller version of an as above, so below version of how you can start following your train of what sparks joy and what doesn't, and eventually, without you actually having to target these areas of your life, you will start having the things come up that are good for you, like such as a yoga practice or a meditation. Those things will come back up or come up as things that actually do spark joy. They feel like start feeling like you could incorporate them as part of your flow. So one other thing that I want to talk about with this is let me see, what was I going to do? So this is like if you think about the idea of trying to train your algorithms, and this is something that I might do another video on it, because this is a big one for me that has been really fundamentally helpful, is anything that I interact with online, whether it's searching for stuff or interacting with social media, even if it's clicking on an article versus actually liking it, it doesn't matter. I really have tried to use all of my online interactions and everything on my phone, for that matter, apps and things like that, tried to train my algorithms by noticing whether a link or whether something sparks joy versus diminishes my spirit, whether something sparks joy or dampens my spirit, whether there's fear or love. So once you've started training yourself, you'll notice that every single article, every single person in your feed or account in your feed, every single photo, every single caption, there's a sense of, does it spark joy or does it not? You'll have a little zing of love, like kind of an excitement, an expansion of your energy, which is what you really want to go for, is expanding your energy. This is growth at its most fundamental level, is this expansion of your energy. So you want to click only on things that expand your energy versus contract your energy. So do not click on or even hover over, as much as you can, obviously. Like, don't just sit there and stare at the picture on a thumbnail and reading a caption about some horrible event that's giving you a pit in your stomach. That is where you need to start scrolling past and only click on the things that actually spark joy. I want to give an example of, and this might how it might be kind of counterintuitive. Like a lot of like, I love animals, but any article about animals online or pictures of animals, so a lot of times, like, I don't actually even want to see them or click on articles about it, because even if it's sort of a happy article about animals, a lot of times it's about an animal being saved from something, or something where it gives me a pit in my stomach before it ever even gives me a zing of like, oh, how cute, I love animals. So for the most part, any of my accounts, which are very few at this point, because I was kind of working just with personally, like Instagram and YouTube, to train these algorithms, any of those accounts, there's never a status or an article that comes up even about current events or about animals, or any number of things that would really be quote unquote triggering for me. So if you can really consciously pay attention to what you're clicking on, this is a major thing that over several months, you really can change your algorithms online. Like, we think of that stuff as being permanent, and it is to a certain extent, but you can absolutely retrain your algorithms to start showing you things that are not going to bring you down and they're not going to contribute to poor mental health. So start doing that. And that's just like a really great concrete place where you can start noticing and honing and calibrating your sense of what gives you joy versus not. And if you click on something and you start getting this sinking pit in your stomach, don't punish yourself for it, but be like, oh, okay, awesome. I'm allowed, like, for me, it's almost this like, oh, good, I don't have to read that. I don't have to click on that. It's like making me feel fear. Even if it's something like where you're like, I should be informed of this. If the title is giving you like a fear-based reaction, or if you see people's statuses and they're talking about something that's giving you kind of a pit in your stomach, but you haven't read about it yet, don't feel like you have to go look that up. I am talking about even to the most major current events, major or the most kind of superficial current events. Like maybe it's something about a celebrity's birthday, or even a celebrity, somebody's famous's death who you don't really know that well or don't really know much about, but then you start digging in and to learn and read about somebody who just died. For some people that could give them a lift, but for a lot of people or some other people, those kinds of things can really bring you down or even slightly diminish your energy. And all these slight diminishments over time, even, you know, over a few hours, really take down your consciousness level and make it very difficult to start picking back up and start noticing things that spark joy. So start doing this throughout your life in every area that you can. And this is just supposed to be something that you're supposed to let it wash over you, because you're not always going to remember this practice that I'm talking about, but try to put up a little index card or something like hanging on your wall saying like, does this spark joy? And just try to remember that as your mantra. And that is going to be your only thing. Your main, most important thing that you do for your mental health is noticing, does this thing spark joy? Does this thing I'm supposed to do? Does this thing I'm about to do? Does this thing I'm about to click on? Does this thing I feel like I need to go do? Does it actually spark joy versus not? And even if you feel like you have to do it, at least noticing whether it does or not will be a good way to hone these things going forward. So train the algorithms of your brain to know and notice when things spark joy versus not. And you're going to train your social media algorithms. And eventually this helps you actually relearn who you are, learn what your preferences are. Some people have never even learned their preferences. I might be one of those people. For a long time, I would say I was indecisive. My whole life, I've said I was indecisive. And now I realize I think it's just really because I was not ever in touch with my body and what I actually wanted versus not. And I was more living in a lower state of consciousness where fear was my main motivator. Does this make me scared or more scared versus does this make me feel love or fear? So we're going to choose to start working towards higher consciousness. And this will take us away from the versions of yourself that keep being walked all over by society, by the others in your life. If you are actually still with somebody, or if you're actually with somebody who is abusing you, or if you're in abusive systems that you even notice, this is a great way, but you can't figure out how to make it change. This is a small thing that you can do privately in your brain to strengthen yourself and to start knowing whether something is really right or wrong. If you're worried about like, I'm not really sure if this person is abusive or not, that's a red flag that you even wonder that. But if you're not ready to make a decision about it, or you feel just kind of uncertain, this is something, don't even think about it. Unless it's just right in front of your face and something is dangerous. Get out of an abusive situation, by the way. But if you can't figure it out, then this is a great way to start working towards becoming someone who will know implicitly whether the relationship is a good relationship for you. And that's the person who's a version of yourself who notices things that spark joy versus things that don't. So when are you going along to go along versus when are you actually doing something because it's really in alignment with your energy. It's in alignment with something that is expanding your energy and lifting you up. Okay, so that's about all that I have on this kind of round of how to not do things that you don't want to do. Yeah, so thanks for listening. My dog is barking and I'm gonna go see what she's barking about. Thanks.